Gucci, one of the most powerful names in the world of fashion, founded by Guccio Gucci over a century ago. This brand is now worth a jaw-dropping $20 billion. But behind all the glitz and glamour lies a very dark, ugly side. Behind the scenes of Gucci's history is filled with family drama, lawsuits, crazy relatives, and even a bone-chilling murder. Everything you need to spin one of the most scandalous tales in history. In this video, we'll talk about the disturbing history of Gucci through 3 generations of Gucci men and the events that led to the family selling the company. Before we get into the details, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos.
Today we do $138 million business with $18 million profit. This is the answer to a dream. I accept.
The patriarch of the Gucci family, Guccio Gucci, was born in Florence, Italy in 1881. When he turned 18, he left his home for London in search of a job and finally got one as a bellhop at the high-end Savoy Hotel. During his time there, Guccio was fascinated by the style of elegant upper-class hotel guests who were always prim and proper. He observed them closely and learned more about their taste in fashion and fabric, and he decided to establish a luxury leather and accessory company of his own. After working in London for a while, Guccio returned to Italy, and in 1921, the very first Gucci store was opened in Florence. The House of Gucci began as a leather company, selling and crafting imported leather materials, and within the first few years, Guccio had up to 60 craftsmen working under him, including his wife and their 6 children. Guccio originally intended for his company to be a small-scale business, but with the rate at which it was growing, it became clearer that Gucci was going to become a much bigger establishment. Gucci stores remained in Florence until 1938, when Guccio's son Aldo started talking about establishing more locations across the country. After much insistence from Aldo, a new shop was set up in Rome. The business continued to expand and even survived the Second World War and all the difficulties that came with it. When the war ended, a new Gucci store was opened in Milan, and with stores in 3 different regions in Italy, Gucci was no longer a small-scale business like Guccio had wanted. Anyway, his time as leader of Gucci was slowly coming to an end, and his sons had bigger dreams for the company. Before he retired, Guccio distributed the company's shares among his 3 sons, Aldo, Vasco, and Rodolfo. These 3 young men opened the first international Gucci store in New York 2 weeks before their father died. After the death of Guccio, more Gucci outlets were opened, but the subtle sibling rivalry among the 3 became more pronounced. Each sibling was interested in securing the largest amount of power for himself, and this rivalry was perhaps the biggest problem of the second generation of Guccis. Unlike their father, who knew how to separate personal life from business, the Gucci brothers did not know how. But it didn't appear that way from the beginning. The second generation actually started out on a good note. Expansions, more creative ideas, big collaborations, and so on. Aldo, Vasco, and Rodolfo traveled the world together to set up new Gucci stores and boutiques, starting off in New York City. Right from when they were working under their father, Aldo had always been interested in expanding the business, and when he became a major shareholder in Gucci, he became super invested in expansion. Being very passionate about fashion, he always said that elegance is like manners. You can't be polite on Wednesday or Thursday. If you are elegant, you should be every day of the week. If you're not, then it's another matter. Under his directorship, shops were opened in Chicago, Palm Beach, Beverly Hills, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and other major cities. The 3 Gucci brothers were doing really well, but sadly, Vasco passed away suddenly in 1974, and the company's shares were split 50-50 between Aldo and Rodolfo. Aldo had 3 sons, so his 50% of the company was for himself and his children. On the other hand, Rodolfo had just 1 son, so his profit from the company was more, in a way. Aldo didn't like this very much, especially because he didn't think Rodolfo contributed to the company's progress as much as he and his sons did. To make more money for himself, Aldo set up a perfume subsidiary of the company and held 80% of it for himself and his sons. Of course, Rodolfo and his sons protested, and the whole situation blew up into a full-on family issue. It became clear that everyone was looking out for themselves financially, and the once synergized Gucci family began to drift apart, and some of them even searched for new business opportunities. For example, Aldo's son Paolo Gucci secretly launched his own fashion design brand under the name Gucci without telling his father or uncle. When they found out, they were furious, so much so that they sued him and fired him from the company. Paolo, who felt like he was stripped of his birthright, resented his father for this and planned his revenge. Shortly after this issue with Paolo, Rodolfo Gucci died, and his share of the company was passed to his son, Maurizio Gucci. Maurizio's introduction to the family business spelled the end of the second generation, and ultimately led to the ruining of the family business. You know what they say about family businesses. The first generation builds, the second expands, and the third destroys. This was the case for the Gucci family, as Maurizio single-handedly led to the downfall of the family business. Ironically, he was the only one of the third-generation Guccis to have even the faintest bit of potential when it came to taking up the family business. In the beginning, Maurizio had no interest in joining the family business, and it took a lot of persuasion to finally get him to join the firm. You must be wondering, how did he go from not being interested to getting rid of his family members and wanting all of Gucci to himself? Maurizio got married in 1972 to Patrizia Reggiani. Patrizia was born into a poor family, but she vowed to herself that she was going to marry into a rich family. Whether it was by coincidence or not, the two met at a fancy party and ended up dating for 2 years. Maurizio's family didn't like Patrizia very much and tagged her as a desperate gold digger. Despite everyone's strong opinions, the two got married, and it was around the same time that Maurizio agreed to join the family business. The couple relocated to New York, and Maurizio embraced his duties as a Gucci. After his father died in 1983, Maurizio traveled back to Milan as the owner of the largest portion of the family company. But just like his father had predicted, Maurizio got power drunk and wanted all the power to himself. You see, Maurizio was ambitious, Gucci was beginning to lose face, and the brand became associated with cheap duty-free bags. Their fakes were everywhere, and their design was becoming old and boring. Maurizio blamed this on the bar leadership of his uncle, Aldo, and he went into a 6-year-long legal battle for the leadership of the company. In order to force him out of office, Maurizio sued his uncle for inappropriately spending the company's funds. Remember Paolo, Aldo's son that wanted revenge? He teamed up with Maurizio, and the two created more problems for Aldo, who was already knee-deep in resolving legal issues. Paolo tipped off the IRS about his father's tax evasion, and this landed Aldo in prison for a year. With Aldo out of the way, Maurizio took over as the company's chairman, but he didn't stop there. In 1989, he teamed with Bahrain-based investment banking and Investcorp, an asset management company, and their goal was to give the company a makeover and run it better than any other family member had done in the past. To that end, Investcorp bought the shares each member of the family owned in the company. Aldo was the last Gucci to sell over his shares, and it took Maurizio's outsmarting him to get him to sign them over. With this, Maurizio became the only family member that still owned shares in the company. Unfortunately, Maurizio had no experience holding a position of that magnitude, and it reflected heavily on the company's finances. After acquiring all the power, he literally ran the business to the ground due to extravagant spending. Between 1991 and 1993, barely 2 years after he gained control of Gucci, the company's finances were in the red. But it wasn't just the company that was falling apart. His personal life was also in shambles. From juggling his secret affairs to his divorce from Patrizia, a very overwhelming woman, Maurizio was going through too much, and there was no way he could properly manage a company in the midst of all this. In order to save the company from collapsing, Maurizio's only option was to sell his shares of the company to Investcorp. How ironic. He ended up selling his shares to the company he hired to replace his family members. Maurizio sold his shares in 1993 for almost $200 million, and with that, the Gucci family's involvement with the company ended. However, Maurizio continued working at the company until his assassination in 1995. He was shot dead on the steps outside his office by a hitman hired by his enraged and malicious ex-wife, Patrizia. Although the two had gotten divorced, Patrizia was infuriated by Maurizio's new relationship. She thought if she couldn't have him, then no one else could, particularly because her divorce settlement would be cut in half if he remarried. To prevent this, she connived with a spirit advisor and hired a hitman who shot Maurizio on the steps of his office in Milan. Maurizio's death was indeed a tragic end to a dynasty that had so much potential. As Maurizio himself rightly said, the story of Gucci is that there were too many cooks in the kitchen. If only the members of the family had not given in to their greed and maliciousness, Gucci might have been a lot more successful, and the once great family would still be relevant today. If you think Gucci is the only fashion house with a controversial history, you're in for a surprise. The disturbing story of Coco Chanel would blow your mind. It's wild. So go check it out yourself right now by clicking the thumbnail on the screen. I'll see you there. Cheers.